It is the Doomsday Podcast. Ed Werder alongside Matt Mosley. We've both been out at the Star on various nights. First night for me, Ed's been out there to meet Tyler Booker, the newest Tyler. And Ed, welcome in for this very special edition. And we got a big time guest coming up. And so I want to let you do the introduction to that. But so far, Cowboys have made some solid picks. Finally, on day three, they get a running back. They waited longer than people thought of for wide receiver and running back. Still waiting on the wide receiver, but there's time. There's time. So as we get ready to talk with one of these big time draft picks, former coaches in college, and I just wanted to. For you to kind of introduce who we're about to speak with, and I think it's going to be a great opportunity to look into not only the second round pick for the Cowboys, but we kind of lucked out. He also has relation to the first round pick.
Yeah, so when the Cowboys made the pick in the second round of Boston College edge rusher Donovan Izaraku, I thought Boston College, I think Bill O'Brien coaches Boston College, and I know Bill O'Brien. I have a phone number for Bill O'Brien. I'm going to reach out to Bill O'Brien and see what he thinks of Izaraku. And almost immediately he responded with a text kind of outlining thoughts he had based on his experience there with him. And at the end of that text, I love Booker too. The Cowboys are having a great draft. And then it occurred to me, before he was at Boston College, he was an offensive coordinator at Alabama under Nick Saban. So maybe he also coached Booker there. Sure enough, he confirmed that. And so it just made a lot of sense to ask Bill O'Brien to give us some time on his Saturday to give us a sense of a perspective from someone who's coached both of these players, Tyler Booker and Donovan Ezerasku. And, Bill's very, very familiar with coaching in the NFL. In 2014, he went to the Houston Texans, and he had back-to-back double-digit win seasons in 2018 and 2019. There were 11-5, 10-6, 21 combined wins, ranked second most in a two-year span in franchise history.
And if you don't mind, I see Coach. See Coach. He's ready to go. And I mean, I'm sure he loved hearing that beautiful introduction.
Thank you, Ed. I love Ed, man. Ed, you're the best.
Coach O'Brien, great to see you. I'm Matt Mosley. You know Ed Werder. And so, yeah, we were in the middle. We thought, well, we have a little time here. We'll give him a big introduction. And so Ed couldn't see you, just waiting up there in the corner. So I think we're off and running. All right, Ed, why don't you take it away since you were doing such a beautiful job with your introduction?
I have no idea why you interrupted me.
He was doing such a nice job.
Now I have to do it all over again when Bill's not there to make sure I get it right.
No, now you edit it down.
Okay. Hey, Bill, we're really grateful that you took some time here on a Saturday to share with our viewers and listeners of the Doomsday Podcast program that we've been doing now for 8 years. You've got unique perspective on each of their first two picks. Alabama offensive guard Tyler Booker, they took him in the first round with a 12th overall pick. And then more recently, you've coached Boston College edge rusher Donovan Izaraku. Did I say that right?
Yeah, it's Ezeraku. That's right. You're close.
Ezeraku. Okay. I just hope I'm going to call him E from now on, just so you know.
Yeah, big E.
Anyway, so the first guy, let's take him in order. What is it in your mind, based on your experience with him at Alabama, that makes Tyler Booker such a unique player that he merits being taken as the first offensive guard with the 12th pick in the draft?
So I was there. Not only did I coach him, but I was on the coaching. I was the offensive coordinator. He was a freshman guard when I was there, but also for his recruiting process. And I take us back to when he first stepped foot on the Alabama campus. I mean, just his energy and his love of football and his, just overall people skills, was a guy that was an outstanding, person right from the day we started recruiting him. Doug Marrone recruited him. Doug Marrone recruited him when we were there together, and
Longtime NFL offensive line coach,
yeah,
one of the very best.
right, with the Patriots now. And so, I think that, the thing that stood out to me about Book right away was it didn't take him long to get acclimated to Alabama and to blocking. We had some good D linemen at Alabama at that time, and he held his own. And he actually started, I want to say, his freshman year, which is rare at Alabama. He probably started the last 3 or 4 games of the year. He played against Auburn in the Iron Bowl. I mean, and I would tell you, like, I would go so far as to say he was one of the leaders of the offense. Bryce Young was there, and Bryce Young was the leader, but I felt like Book really did a great job of leading at a young age. And I think I told you Dallas made a great pick with him. He's a guard. He's a big bodied guard. He's a tough guy. I think he can anchor the pocket, and I think he can block all kinds of different run schemes. I think he can block, the wide zone, the inside zone. He can double team very well. He can pull. So I'm excited for Dallas relative to that pick. He's a great kid.
Some people question a little bit his athleticism and his ability to block in space and to move, but it sounds like based on what experience you've had with him, that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah, I would disagree with that. I mean, we ran a lot of pin and pull. Like we ran a lot of screens where he had to pull out on the perimeter. He had to run the pin and pull play when I was there. And we also ran Alabama football, right? We were downhill, so he's very, very good at that. But he can get out on the perimeter, and he'll get better and better. He'll be coached really well, and I just think but it's even more than that, like especially like with Zach Martin retiring. Like this is, Zach Martin's, I know you would agree with this, a Hall of Fame guard. I mean, this guy was a great player in Dallas. This kid Booker is kind of in that same line relative to the love of football, the character. He'll be a captain there. I just think he's got a great future in Dallas.
Was that something when you were a head coach in the NFL, the fact that people were captains, the first 2 picks the Cowboys had, including the guy coming from your team as a Raku? I mean, big time character captains. Like I know you can't take all captains, but like how big of that in the equation when you were in that war room in the NFL did that play? Just that character aspect of it.
For me personally, it was huge. That was just, that was something that I really believed in. I think like nowadays, you guys know, like with the money involved, and you really can't make mistakes. You don't have a lot of time to win and things like that. You don't want guys that you have to babysit. You want guys that you can coach, and they're coachable, and look, you're going to have to teach them the NFL game, and you're going to have to teach them your playbook and all those things. But at the end of the day, they're going to be there every day. They're going to show up on time. They're going to stay extra. They're going to do whatever it takes to be a really good pro. And that's Donovan. That's the way he was from the day we set foot here a year and a half ago. He was, obviously one of the main leaders of the team, and he worked extra hard, and just an ambassador for BC. I mean, a great guy on campus, great guy in the locker room, and had a great senior year for us.
When you talk about what Booker achieved, I mean, I know he left his family basically at 14. He told us yesterday. He went to the IMG Academy in Florida, played at a high enough level there to go to Alabama, which plays a national championship schedule every year, becomes a starter and quickly a captain. They're like, how hard is that to accomplish for an individual who's as young as he is at that time?
Yeah, I mean, I just listening to you say that, I mean, that's exactly right. I mean, here's a guy that that is mature beyond his years. I mean, really, Ed, like you've been to Alabama, like when you come to Alabama, that's a hard deal. When you come to play for Coach Saban, with all the winning that had been done before that, there's an amount of pressure, especially on the offensive line. And he was the top recruit. He was the top guy we signed at that position. He came in there, and there wasn't anything that he didn't dip his toe in the water. He came in, and he made his share of mistakes as a freshman. But at the end of the day, man, I just think he was one of those rare freshmen that came in there and could play right away, didn't have to redshirt. It really got right into the culture of Alabama, understood it, and wore his heart on his sleeve when it came to that. You know what I mean? He's going to bleed Dallas Cowboy blue. He's going to bleed it. He's very loyal, and that's like I said, like you said, leaving home when you're 14 years old to really say to yourself, hey, look, this is my goal. I want to be I want to be a professional football player. He really, that's what he's all about. And he'll be a great pro.
Does those experiences, you think, help him make the transition to not only the NFL but to, one of the best known, most visible franchises in the history of football?
Yeah, I think so. Like he'll be used to playing in an iconic program. I'm not saying, I'm not trying to compare college football to pro football, but I'm just saying like the Dallas Star and the Alabama VA, right? He'll understand what it's like to. I mean, he played in front of huge crowds, big games, SEC championship games, national championship games. The Auburn game is a huge game. You cannot lose the Auburn game at Alabama. And so he played in those games, and he knows what it takes to get ready to play in the big games. The Giants, the Eagles, the Redskins, the Commanders, the divisional games. Those are huge games. Those are iconic games, and I think he'll understand what those games are all about.
Bill, do you smile when you see Coach Saban, like how charming and somewhat kind and benevolent he comes across on TV? Or do you ever like, wait a second, what's going on here? I mean, I'm sure you have seen that out of him, but it is interesting because the rest of us maybe don't totally know that side of him.
Yeah, he's great though. He got nominated for an Emmy. I think he got nominated for an Emmy. I think, but he does an awesome job on TV. And look, he was a perfectionist. He had obviously a very high standard that we all had to work towards every single day. But he had his great moments of he understood you personally, he understood your family. Had a good sense of humor. He had a lot of different sayings that West Virginia type sayings that we all thought were funny. We were trying to figure them out to this day. But he does an awesome job on TV. It was the same with the team, and the same with Bill Belichick. Like in front of the team, they're able to boil it down to its simplest form, so that the team understands. And now for Nick, the fans understand. He does a great job of teaching football with those little X's and O's segments that he does. I think he does an excellent job. I enjoy watching him.
One of the things, Bill, that Booker said yesterday in his introductory press conference was, "Hey, I love winning, but I really hate losing."
Yeah.
And he said, "I had to leave Alabama without winning a national championship.
Yeah.
I'll never win a national championship, and I'm going to carry that with me, the rest of my career, the rest of my life."
Yeah.
That I think that really gives you a sense of just how much the game and the performance and the.
Yeah, no doubt. I would say he's got his family and I think he's a spiritual guy, and those are the things that are the main things in his life. But I mean, football is his life. Like, this guy wants to win. He definitely hates to lose. I can remember the look on his face. We didn't lose much when he was there, but a couple games here and there, and the look on his face. He and what I remember too, Ed, is when he would come back the next week, how pissed off he was. Right, like ready to get going on the next opponent. His practice habits, and really getting after the scout team. Or a lot of times we did a lot of good on good at Alabama. He'd be blocking, some of those. Tim Smith, who I just saw just got drafted. He had to block Tim Smith every day. So I think this guy, he definitely hates losing, and I think he brings a really passionate winning mentality to the game.
And then their second round pick, Ezra Raku, you just coached him in your first year at Boston College. He finished second in the FBS with 16 and a half sacks. I think his family came from Nigeria. Give us a sense of his football journey, getting to Boston College and playing last year for you.
Yeah, this guy was not a very highly recruited guy coming out of high school, right? He and so when he got to BC, this was a game that he was continuing to learn, and this guy just put the work in. Obviously we only had him for a year. Tim Lewis was our defensive coordinator, brought a really good scheme to BC, and Donovan was able to take advantage of all the different ways that we used him, and he is a self-made guy. Like, he would stay after practice. That's another guy. I know I've mentioned this name before, but again, Doug Marrone spent a lot of time with Donovan this year, teaching him or showing him, the tackles that he would have to go against and what they were good at relative to run game, pass game, and all that. And I think that helped him a lot. And Donovan, took the coaching very well and went out there, practiced every day, never missed practice, practiced very hard. I mean, chasing down plays. He had the habits of a pro, and he was a unanimous captain selection for us. Everybody on the team voted for him. And he didn't, I was a new coach, and yeah, I had a lot of experience and all that, but I mean, he didn't have to buy into what we were selling right away, and he did, and he got the rest of the team to buy in, and he had a great year for us. This guy actually like won us a few games. I mean, he won us the Syracuse game with a strip sack. He won us the Western Kentucky game with a strip sack. The North Carolina or Pitt, one of those. But I mean, I'm talking about like strip sacks to win the game. To get the ball back to the offense in the fourth quarter. He made those plays, so he's got that mentality.
I think he created like 8 fumbles last year. Mm-hmm. What makes him so good at the strip sack, which is so essential to playing defense in the NFL and creating turnover opportunities for your team?
He's probably like 6'3", so some people might say he's a little undersized, but he's got great length. I'm not sure exactly what his arm length is, but he's got really good length. So he could get his hands on a tackle, and he could also dip. He had really good leverage and flexibility to be able to dip, great takeoff, and then his acceleration to the quarterback, and then be able to get his arms on the ball. He just had great instincts to go right for the ball. He was not a robotic pass rusher. He knew that the most important thing was to get the football, and I think that's why he created those eight or so turnovers that he had. He did an unbelievable job. He's got a knack for it. He's just got a real good knack for getting the football off the quarterback.
And Coach, what do you think about against the run? That'll be an area where people say, okay, he's a great pass rusher, strip sacks, all these things. Can he hold up against the run? On his frame, do you think he's a guy who will add a few pounds, muscle, that kind of thing? And how did he hold up against the run throughout the season?
He's a strong guy. I do think he's probably about 245 right now. He'd probably get to 250. He could probably weigh 255. He's very strong, Matt. He's like a very strong guy. Like he can squat a ton. I'm not sure his exact numbers, but he can squat. He can power clean. Like I said about the length, he can get his hands on a tackle and win the leverage battle. But that'll be the big test for him, right? That'll be the big test, is taking on those big tackles and being able to set the edge. He'll wear out a tight end. He won't have an issue with tight ends in run blocking, but it's the big tackles coming out on him. And, he'll work hard to get better and better at that. And, I don't doubt that he'll be able to help against the run. He did a really good job against us. Now, we weren't always going against, NFL tackles. Like, don't get me wrong, but he did an excellent job of playing the run for us. Had a lot of TFLs, chasing plays down from behind when the ball was run away from him. He's very fast, very instinctive. He did a really good job for us against the run.
Sounds like a pretty relentless style of defensive player.
No doubt. He plays very, very hard. He plays. He definitely plays to that phrase, the echo of the whistle. He definitely plays every play 100 miles an hour.
Does he sound like the perfect guy to be in tandem with Micah Parsons, who's one of the most accomplished young pass rushers in the history of the league?
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, my last year in New England, we played Dallas, and I think every single play we had to know how we were handling Micah Parsons, or we tried to handle him. I mean, he's wreaking havoc in there, and I think the way that I don't know what it is with the new staff, but I'm sure that the way that they'll use Micah and Donovan to kind of offset each other. That's the other thing about Donovan. He's very versatile. He can play on the second level. He can do things at a linebacker type position too. So he doesn't always have to be on the edge of the defense. And I think he'll help Micah. I think he'll help. There's times maybe where they can line Micah and him up on the same side and, single them both up, things like that. So I think they'll do a lot of things to help free up him and Micah.
If you could draw some of those things out on a napkin, we'd be glad to give them to Matt Eberflus. He is their third different defensive coordinator in 3 years. If I could use a little help.
Yeah, no, he doesn't need my advice. Matt Eberflus will do a great job with those guys. But yeah, no, Matt does a good job defensively. He was with Indy when I was in Houston, and we see him twice a year. He was a tough guy to go against, so he'll know he'll have a great idea of how to use both those guys.
So as an evaluator of this draft, based on these first two picks, how much did the Cowboys help themselves with these two players?
I really think they helped themselves a lot. They helped their locker room. They helped on the field. You've got two guys that love football, that know how to practice, that know how to take care of their bodies. There's not a lot you have to teach them when it comes to the intangibles, right? You've got to teach them, how to play pro football, but you don't have to teach them, how to be on time, how to take care of your body, the right nutrition, how to practice, how much you have to get out of the different drill work that you do. There's certain things that they're already professional at, I believe both guys. And so I think that's a big part of why they help themselves.
All right, I got you down as giving the Cowboys an A-, if kind of like the Kuiper. You're giving out grades, so I'll assign an A- from you. By the way, did you always kind of know in the back of your mind that you and Bill Belichick would end up coaching against each other in the ACC? Was that
How
kind
about that? What a world we live in. What a world we live in. No, I did not have that on the bingo card. That's for sure.
What was your reaction to that? I think most people thought he was going to go, try and get those last dozen or so wins. He needs to become the winningest all-time coach in the NFL, and instead he goes to North Carolina.
I think Bill, Ed, Bill, I think Bill is also very passionate about, doing it his way, right? And putting his program together on the field, off the field, all the different things that he does. When we went back for Brady's retirement deal at Gillette, last summer, it was amazing to me, all the video, the medical, the nutrition, the equipment room, the strength room, the weight room, all of that. Bill brought all those people in. He put all that together, let alone the players that he brought in. So I think he wants to run his own deal. And so I think he's a ball coach, and he'll do a good job at North Carolina. We don't play them till 2028, but maybe TV might get intervened on that, and TV might set up a game maybe before that. But we're not scheduled to play them in the regular season till 2028.
Mm-hmm. I did want to ask you, having done all this and drafted these players, and you've seen players slide down the board who were supposed to go.
We just mentioned Tom Brady, a 6th-round pick.
Yeah, was a 6th-round pick. Ended up becoming the greatest of all time. I'm not saying that's going to happen with Shadur Sanders, but unfortunately, or whatever, this has sort of overshadowed the entire draft. Watching this, he finally lands at a place where apparently the Browns stacking quarterbacks. He lands in the 5th round today. As you're watching it as a former NFL head coach and a college head coach, do you watch it with a sense of sort of compassion? Is there a fan in you who's like us, like this is crazy? How did you take that in, watching that happen over the past couple of days?
I watch it definitely, from the outside now. I definitely watch it with compassion. And the reason why I say that is, here's a kid who's, whatever, he's probably 20, 21 years old. I'm not sure how. He's not like this guy is a young guy who, did a great job at Jackson State, did a great job at Colorado, plays for as you guys know, a famous dad, one of the greatest football players of all time is his dad and his coach. And the guy was a very productive college player. But, look, whatever happened in the NFL, whatever happened in the evaluation process, he dropped a little bit. The one thing, if I was, and I don't know them at all, I have great admiration for Prime, and I don't know the family at all, but if I had to give any advice to Shadur, it doesn't matter. I used to say this in Houston all the time. It doesn't matter how you got there. It's what you do when you get there. So once he's there now in Cleveland, go to work, man. Put your head down and go to work, learn the system, show up every day, compete, get better every single day. That's what it's all about. It's all about what you do once you get there. I used to tell those guys in Houston, I don't care where you were drafted, man. What are you going to do for us now? That's the big thing. And how are you going to help us be a winning team?
Bill, thanks so much for giving us a nice chunk of your Saturday afternoon to talk football and to share your unique insight on especially the two players the Cowboys took at the top of the draft. And we'll look forward to seeing you go against Bill Belichick when the time comes. And until then, congratulations on your success at Boston College, and good luck going forward. You're one of my favorite guys in the NFL ever to deal with. I can always rely on you to shoot me straight and give me time
Yep.
Always appreciate your professionalism, and thanks so much for doing this.
I appreciate it. Thank you guys for having me on. That was fun. I enjoyed talking to you, Ed, obviously, and meeting you, Matt. And I'll tell you, it's fun to talk about good players like that. So I appreciate you guys giving me some time on here. Thank you.
We look forward to doing this every week if that's the case.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
I was
No
stalling because I was hoping the Cowboys would take another one of your players and we could ask maybe some in the seventh round or something. So I've been kind of watching what the Cowboys are doing while we tape this. But
there's a couple guys out there still. There's
Okay.
Drew Kendall got drafted by the Eagles, but I think Cam Horsley might. I don't know. See if he goes late. The defensive tackle, and then we have a big offensive lineman, Jack Conley. We'll see what happens. But yeah, no, it'd be. But anytime you guys want me on, I'd love to come on. I appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Bill.
Thank you, Ed.
Thanks, Bill.
Yeah.
All right. It is Doomsday Podcast, and there he was, Bill O'Brien, the interview. And we were thinking of him because he's a head coach at Boston College, but Ed quickly realized when we reached out to him about the second round pick, hey, this guy coached the first round pick as well. And Ed, I just want to compliment you because, and we'll get into the Cowboys. You and I have both been out there at the Star, and we spent some time out there. We both talked to Jerry and Steven and some of the players, the big players in this, and we can kind of talk about this overall approach they did. But I just want to credit you for getting us another big name guest, former NFL head coach. He's been a head college coach at Penn State and now Boston College. And I thought it worked out beautifully. We had a few years ago, we had the defensive line coach from UCF, and he actually was really helpful. He may have been was he the defense coordinator anyway?
Randy Shannon.
Yeah, we had a lot of that was great, but this was maybe even better because to have the head coach of the player and the offensive coordinator of Tyler Booker. So, and he just honestly, somehow it's interesting that you had a very good opinion of Bill O'Brien. I just think because of some of the way things went in Houston, and I hadn't been around him much, I was kind of like a little bit, I mean, I was excited to talk to him, but I always had this certain view of him. And but I would just tell you, he was great to visit with, and he gave us exactly, kind of what we needed, and it exceeded our expectations.
Yeah, Bill's been a guy who I've covered a lot in the NFL, and just someone who, when I got assigned a Texans game, he would always find time for me in his weekly schedule to talk about his team and his players and the matchup. And I thought he was not only gracious with his time, but more importantly, he was incredibly honest about, sharing his opinion, the opinions he shared. That doesn't always happen. And Bill would tell me things that were on and off the record, and I always felt he was being very truthful. And people forget that he had a lot of success. Like, he won division titles in Houston. They went to playoff games in Houston. He was coaching the Texans when they had Deshaun Watson at his best, and when J.J. Watt was winning 3 Defensive Player of the Year awards. So he had very good, very competitive teams. And as you mentioned, he is a longtime associate of Bill Belichick's. But yeah, a guy who's been a play caller in the NFL for Tom Brady. Yeah, he's got great perspective. He's been a football coach for 32 years, at the highest levels of the sport. And so to have that opportunity to get him to share with our audience his direct knowledge of 2 people who are the Cowboys, Jerry Jones has invested so much in terms of draft picks and draft capital and financial value of these picks and the roles that they expect them to play, not only this coming season, but for maybe the next decade or so, is invaluable to me.
Well, his presence and ours, of course, but will make this one of the most listened to Cowboys podcasts in the country. And don't, for the rest of this, as we tape this, Ed, on late on Saturday afternoon, don't let that make you nervous. The fact that we'll probably have about 50 to 100,000 downloads. Just kind of take your time. Although you've been very uniquely prepared for this because at times you were on camera in front of millions. And so anyway, I think doing a podcast probably is a pretty comfortable situation for you. Now, Cowboys continue to make picks, even as we tape this. And so we've got some coming in. We'll catch you up on everything they've done and kind of give you our thumbnail takes and some feelings. But Ed, I thought it'd be good. I was there the first night. You went out there the second day of the draft and actually welcomed Tyler Booker into Dallas. I don't know if you got to shake hands with him, one on one,
I mean,
but
I
you were
didn't
out
open the
there.
doors to from the bus or to the Star or anything like that. But
Yeah.
I didn't brush off his seat at the press conference and so forth. But yes, I was there to greet him warmly.
Yeah.
I did ask a few questions. So
good.
And because of the process of you having to announce your name and your affiliation, I'm sure he now remembers who I am and who I was with yesterday when I was out there.
It's extremely important that everybody knows who we are and who we represent, and I'm so glad that we do that. Now, Ed, I'm out there the night after that first. So there's a late news conference, and we're waiting on them, and Jerry and Will and the whole crew come rolling out of there. Now, they're pretty usually upfront about, okay, we tried to do this and we gave this many first round grades. Jerry, they picked 12. Jerry said that they had only 12 first round grades. He did say that Tyler Booker was one of those. And I would say this pick, at least from our audience and a lot of Cowboys fans, was not met with like great excitement. I mean, I think the more they hear from Tyler Booker, I think you got to like him. I think you got to enjoy. I think all the leadership stuff is dead on. We just knew kind of what they needed in terms of playmakers and all of that. But I guess Jerry did give us a clue at that pre-draft news conference that I attended the other day, because he basically said, I don't think our problem last year was as much the running back as some of you think it was. I think it was on the O-line. And so I guess we shouldn't have been shocked when they went ahead and picked an O-lineman with the first, and you're always good at putting these things in perspective, but even going back to Tyron Smith, and we've talked about him because he retired just a few days ago. The Cowboys went forever without spending a first round pick. I mean, what was it, Ed? All the way back to like Howard Richards or something?
1981 to 2011. And I was in attendance, I don't know, a week or so ago when Tyron Smith announced his retirement. And Jerry Jones said it was the success of drafting Tyron Smith 9th overall in the first round that changed their mindset about how to construct a team and whether it was worthwhile to invest high first round picks in offensive linemen. Because soon after that, as you might remember, they drafted Travis Frederick with a first round pick and Zach Martin with a first round pick. And that was all at the beginning of the Jason Garrett era. And to me, when you step back and look at this and view it in, here's what the conclusion I came to is that Jerry regards that era, that decade under Jason Garrett, as having been more successful than the general public does and the media does. Because even though they really never accomplished anything of great consequence in his mind, played the game the right way to give themselves the best chance, and they weren't over-reliant on Tony Romo, that they were a more balanced offensive team. They could run the football with DeMarco Murray or later with Ezekiel Elliott. And so to me, what they're doing now, Brian Schottenheimer being promoted from offensive coordinator to first-time head coach, that's what Jerry did with Jason Garrett. He promoted Jason Garrett from offensive coordinator to first-time NFL head coach. And then they set about creating a dominant offensive line because of the competition from the division that they play in. And I think that's what we're seeing here right now. I mean, the Cowboys have taken 6 offensive linemen in the first round since they drafted Tyron Smith 9th overall. There have only been 96 offensive linemen taken in the first round by all NFL teams in that period, an average of 3 a team. The Cowboys have twice that number. And so I see them right now preparing to make the transition from being a Dak Prescott-oriented, Dak-friendly, shotgun primarily, throw-first offense under Mike McCarthy back to something where they are creating a more physical identity. They're trying to establish the running game and then trying to create explosive plays off of that. And to me, that's the only way. Booker was the 4th offensive lineman taken, but he was the only one of those who is only a guard. like everybody else, even Banks, who was taken ninth by New Orleans, even he is an experienced tackle. That's where the value usually is. Like, I mean, Schottenheimer told us at the owners' meetings how much in building a team, you have to value the outside, the perimeter players, the receivers, the pass rushers, the tackles, quarterbacks, because those are the positions where players get isolated one-on-one. And that's why those players typically make the most money under the cap, other than quarterbacks. And yet, his desire to create control on the offensive and defensive lines has led them to make the first two picks that they did. And that doesn't really match up with what he had just said about how he wants to create a team and where you have to go. And so the fact that Booker is only an interior offensive lineman, and you heard Bill O'Brien sort of refute, but I reached out to three teams, Matt, and asked them their opinion. They all thought nobody in the league has a question about Booker being a good player and worthy of a first-round pick, but they also mentioned that he does have some physical, athletic limitations. He did not test particularly. He ran like 5'3". He did not test particularly well athletically, but he's going to dominate his position, and he's going to give you a chance to match up physically with that front of the Philadelphia Eagles, the defending Super Bowl and division champions that you have to get through now. But to me, none of this works, Matt, unless they can block on the perimeter. That was really their problem last year. If you look at the numbers, the center, even though the center was a rookie, Cooper Beebe was a rookie, and they had, Zach Martin wasn't really the all-pro we've known him to be most of his career, and ultimately didn't finish the season. The interior three blocked really well, both run and pass. The numbers outside were terrible. And if Tyler Guyton, their first-round pick last year, doesn't play better and can't be a productive left tackle, and Terrence Steele doesn't pass protect better than he did last year, then none of this is going to work.
Yeah, that is the upside and downside of it. I would say from the way this kid came across, Ed, was he's very. You could just see there was at least one story out there that was suggesting they needed leadership, and then somebody got mad and like, what do you think about Tyler Smith? He's a great leader, and I didn't really follow it too much, but it was interesting to hear Bill O'Brien say to us that this guy is not going to show up and be like, okay, who's the leader here? Like, he was a leader from the time he walked on the Alabama campus. And so I think that if you want to be happy about this trade, or excuse me, about this pick, that's the part to be excited about, is that he seems to bring all the intangibles. And I don't think we're like doubting anything about the player. It's just the position that the player plays. And then, okay, so they don't take, and Ed, just so we're straight here with everybody, and remind, we've heard now that it was Houston who they were talking about trading down. And so they got stuck on that 12 pick. They were trying to trade out of it, and Houston was willing. And there was something, Jerry told me that with a minute left, they were still kind of going back and forth. But I think Houston wanted to give them something in next year's draft, and they were more interested in things for this year's draft. And so it just didn't happen. And so they decided to stay there and pick. Now, Ed, we can speculate. I'll just speculate real quickly. If they had have traded down there, and Houston would have been coming up from pretty far down, right? I'm just
thinking of 25 or something like that.
Yeah, so they were going to have to come up the board, and I'm sure that's why the Cowboys were like, "Hey, if you're going to come up that far, we're gonna really need some ammunition here." I think the play would have been to get somebody like Golden, Agbuka from Ohio State, or some player along those lines. Now, the Cowboys say they had a first-round grade. I guess I believe them on this offensive lineman. A lot of people, Ed, everybody apparently in America has their own board now, and this guy was very high up on a lot of boards. But I say that Ed had him maybe being available in the 20s, right? When everybody was mock drafting and all leading up to this draft.
Yeah, I had actually typed out all of the mock drafts, and of course now I can't find them when I want to. But yeah, I think that we all thought going into this draft that there were some wide receivers, there were, maybe some running backs that would give the Cowboys a kind of dynamic playmakers that we think this offense really needs. I mean, they're coming off a season where they didn't have Dak Prescott for the majority of the season, but they got Mike McCarthy fired, or he got himself fired. They only averaged 20 points a game. That's the fewest they've scored on average since they drafted Dak Prescott. And the drop off in terms of how many they scored versus how many they allowed was the third largest in NFL history. They were terrible in the red zone. Only the Giants were worse. They only scored a third of the number of touchdowns that the Detroit Lions did in leading the league. And so it was just a horrible offensive season, and they've desperately needed playmakers. And, I thought the draft really matched up well to their needs because I thought they needed wide receiver, running back, corner, and maybe defensive tackle. And, their first three picks addressed one of those three positions, and the player they took in the third round, Ravel, is coming off an ACL injury himself, so he may not be ready. Certainly not at the start of training camp is what I've been told, maybe mid to late training camp. But it's also, I also do remember, like you said, that at the end of the season, Jerry said, as he appraised the failure of the team, he said, you know what, I think ultimately what we did on the offensive line, what we were trying, the impact of starting two rookies on the offensive line at center and left tackle in Guyton and Beebe, both of whom transitioning to the NFL. And so he's, like you said, he cited that as being more responsible for their failure in the run game than the lack of a quality back, although he may just have, you said it, been insulating himself from criticism about not signing Derrick Henry or even pursuing him. But also it's, Jerry said, hey, one of the things when we promoted Brian Schottenheimer, we started talking about putting the staff together, we spent a lot of time talking about the emphasis I wanted to put, this is Jerry, I wanted to put on the offensive line. And so they went out and hired Clayton Adams as an offensive coordinator who was the offensive line coach background, and then hired an offensive line coach, Connor Riley from Kansas State. So they had put a big emphasis on that. So maybe we shouldn't have been shocked that they drafted an offensive lineman. And it's entirely possible that they value right guard more than we do because, geez, they had Zach Martin, one of the greatest in NFL history, play there for a decade.
Mm-hmm.
And so they value that in a way that maybe most other teams and certainly people like us don't.
Well, and I think they value this group of second through six wide receivers way more than we do that they have in camp right now. And of course, they could still, they hinted at some kind of trade. We've seen other teams make some trades during this draft for players and that kind of thing. And the Cowboys have traded up to get a player. But in terms of substantive trades that we kind of maybe thought were going to lead to another player, could they add a running back that way? Could they add a wide receiver somehow? Certainly has not happened to this point. And I would say, as we tape this, the Cowboys and a lot of teams like to add these massive nose tackles in the seventh round for whatever reason. I mean, I think it's a pretty valuable position, but for whatever reason, a lot of them seem to go late. And the Cowboys have added UCLA defensive tackle Jay Toya. We'll go through some of these picks. 6'2", 342 pounds. And
not as big as a Florida defensive tackle.
What's that?
He's not as big as a Florida defensive tackle who's already off the board. He's the heaviest NFL player in history.
Wow. What did it come in at? About 380?
He was 360 something, I think. Yeah.
Goodness gracious. Who was the biggest ever? I'm thinking the biggest nose tackle in NFL. I'm not talking about when they were drafted. I'm just thinking when we think of massive nose tackles.
Wilfork.
Vince Wilfork was enormous. I think of who is the guy that was with the Ravens for so long? That was a great player. No, not Siragusa. More recent than that. He was a Polynesian player, but he had a great run.
Not Calais Campbell. Calais Campbell's tall, but
no. Anyway, I don't know why I can't think because he was only All-Pro there for about 7 seasons. But anyway, I just think of these mass. Even on who's on ESPN, the one guy's lost.
Oh, you're thinking of Haloti Ngata?
Yes. Yeah. And of course, the Cowboys, honestly, finally, a few a couple of seasons ago, they had to spend like a seventh round pick to bring in a veteran who helped them get through a season. And it's very interesting to me. The Cowboys a lot of times start seasons without the kind of player they need, and then they're all of a sudden they're like, wait a second, shouldn't we get some enormous? The big defensive tackle that Parcells loved was Jason Ferguson. He had him with the Jets, and then he had him with the Cowboys. Okay, Ed, as these players continue to sprinkle in, I do want to have a discussion on Shadur in a second because I think people you have your Colorado background. You have a Dion background as well. Dion kind of lit into you a couple of years ago for no apparent reason. I mean, a lot of times you deserve it. I don't think that one. I think he just saw a familiar face, so he kind of went after you. But we do need to kind of talk about what happened there. We had a couple of these, the second and third round picks. The Donovan Ezeraku, who we were just talking with Bill O'Brien. I would say on the upside, the whole bendy, twitchy, hugely productive, great character, no character concerns at all. Thank goodness, no injury concerns that I can think of. But Bill said he could only probably see him getting up to about 255. So any thought of this guy kind of putting on a bunch of weight and being some kind of big run defender, at least for now, Ed, he sort of projects as a true pass rushing specialist, which is okay. But he doesn't, to me, feel like a total three down player. And of course, they needed these walk in starters. I don't know. I think he'll be able to help them right away, but he's pretty slight. I mean, he's 248 and but he's hugely productive. So the good news is picking at 44, they got a player that some people even had a first round grade on, and a lot of people had projected somewhere in like the 23 to 28 range or somewhere like that. So I think they got good value, and they didn't have to get like an injury guy to get the good value. So overall, I like the pick. I just would say I don't look at this guy as a walk in. He's going to be out there every down. That he does not strike me as that type.
Well, DeMarcus Lawrence obviously, missed most of last year, then left the organization this offseason to sign with the Seahawks. And I'm not sure that Ezeraku is that kind of player because Lawrence was special in his ability to set the edge and play the run as well as rush the passer. We'll have to see if Ezeraku can do that, but it's all about rushing the passer in the NFL right now. And they have Micah Parsons and Dante Fowler Jr.'s come back. They signed him in free agency, and then they have Ezeraku who would also rush off the edge. They were third in the NFL in out Lawrence, and with Micah missing time for the first time in his career, missed 4 games with that high ankle. But I think they're set up pretty well, and I think that maybe people didn't recognize how bad they were defensively last year. Like, they were a bad defensive team. They needed to commit some resources in the offseason and high in this draft to the defense. They allowed the only team to allow more points than the Cowboys last season were the Carolina Panthers. And the Carolina Panthers allowed the most points in NFL history in a single season. So they were that bad on defense. So I think this move makes a lot of sense. I think there was a lot of value in the pick. He plays a position of value. And so I think that pick was totally justified. A guy who can create sacks, negative plays. As Bill mentioned, the 8 forced fumbles. He's a sack fumble guy. Aaron Whitecotton, the new defensive line coach, was actually at his pro day and seemed pretty excited about getting him. But his ability to exploit the edge and come around the edge and create pressure on the passer, I give him a lot of credit for making this pick. I mean, he was the ACC Defensive Player of the Year, the Ted Hendricks Award winner as a top pass rusher in the country. To get him in the second round seems ridiculous.
Okay, good value. Ed likes the value. Ed had the first pick as a total reach. No, he didn't say that, but this one was the farthest thing from a reach. Third round pick, interesting because this is where the Cowboys get back into, and it's gotten them in trouble at times. Oh my gosh, we get huge value. There's nothing that Jerry loves more than than getting a first round talent in like the third or fourth round. And we've seen it over the years. I mean, they basically had to almost invent the surgery to try to bring Jalen Smith back. And he ended up being a decent player, but certainly not the kind of player that he was destined to be before he had the horrible injury at Notre Dame. Ed, this is Siobhan Revel Jr. Revel, but Revel Jr. out of East Carolina. And interesting story because he was a JUCO guy. I think had some grade stuff. I didn't even think that was a thing anymore in college football. But he had some injuries, and again, that gives me pause because it wasn't just the one big injury that he had this past season. But and he ends up getting to East Carolina and seemed to be projecting toward a first round. Maybe some had him as possibly the best cornerback in the draft, and then had the ACL in September. And then, Ed, we know the rest of this story because, Ed, can you tell us who performed surgery on this young man?
Dr. Dan Cooper, team orthopedist, does a lot of surgeries on professional athletes, especially NFL players who have knee injuries. And I think you had an excellent tweet earlier today about who the Cowboys might draft next, who looking at Dr. Cooper's surgical schedule to make that pick because he did Jalen Smith's surgery. And Jerry has taken a lot of he's like you said, it's usually in the second round where he's made this gamble, right? The risk reward of I can get a first round player who's coming off an injury or has a character issue in the second round. They made Jerry wait till the third round this time with this pick, but apparently his recovery schedule puts him, according to a source I spoke to, on a projection of being cleared medically to return to the field sometime mid to late training camp. And I think Stephen Jones said last night, start the offseason on PUP. He's already trying to make a transition from East Carolina, coming off this ACL injury. Only played 3 games last year. Backstory. But the Cowboys, he's ahead of Trayvon Diggs in his recovery. And so they lost Jordan Lewis in the offseason. They have Deron Bland, who only played a handful of games last year. So cornerback was a big concern for Matt Eberflus, the new defensive coordinator. And if Revel can get healthy and make the transition and be available early in the season, they made a trade for Elam from Buffalo. He was a former number 1 pick. So they have a bunch of candidates once Revel gets healthy, and the presumption is that he'll get healthy. But as we've seen, sometimes these guys aren't at their best in the first year coming off the surgery of this consequence.
Okay, and Ed, I wanted to give you an opportunity. Any of these other players you want to? I mean, Jaden Blue, because I watch a lot of the University of Texas. He's got great speed. He certainly can catch the football. I mean, I wouldn't, when I think of some of the great backs that have come out of there in even recent years, Bijan Robinson being one of those. He doesn't have that kind of size. Now, they got to the playoff, and he was really good under Sark. And getting a guy with that value there, to me, is pretty good. I don't know, Ed, you probably have his 40 times in front of you. I would have to think he was pretty good. I mean, there are bigger backs. But I in big moments, he was good, made catches down the field. He can catch balls away from his body. I like him. McConaughey loves the pick. Of course, McConaughey has weighed in on every Texas pick. I did want to say one thing about University of Texas. I don't always say kind things about the University of Texas because I didn't go there and don't really have a full appreciation for the place. But Ed, his name was the Texas kid today that thought he was probably going to go in the second round on the second night. And instead of flying home like almost anybody would, he just stayed in the green room. And so Goodell, again, he takes a lot of heat, but I thought that was kind of cool too. Roger Goodell, because everybody else was doing the third day picks and announcing the picks and people from London and wherever. And Roger came out and announced this guy. And I thought that was kind of neat. And the guy,
and he was picked by Green Bay, and the draft's in Green Bay.
Yes.
So that added to the whole thing. But Jadon Blue to me kind of gives you that Tony Pollard dimension.
Mm.
I don't know that he's going to be an every down player right away. But they got Javonte Williams in the offseason from Denver. He led them in rushing each of the last 2 years. He's supposed to be a really good third down back, and I would think that's where Blue kind of factors in as well. He's only the second offensive player picked in this draft by the Cowboys. He mentioned Jahmyr Gibbs as his comp. His top speed, you mentioned his speed. I think he was the third fastest running back at the combine. His best college speed was 22.3 miles an hour. Kevontae Turpin and Raheem Mostert are the only NFL ball carriers to hit that number or faster since 2020. So he does have remarkable speed. The Cowboys have pretty much neglected this position to their own detriment. They've only selected one running back between in 47 picks. They went 47 picks before they selected Blue without choosing a running back. And the last one they selected was Deuce Vaughn. So he weighed 196 at the combine. Only 4 running backs at the combine were under 200 pounds. Marcus Yarns, SMU's Brashard Smith, and Trevor Etienne. And Etienne is interesting, obviously, because he wound up being picked with the Cowboys pick in the 4th round that they didn't have. Once again, they didn't have a
Mingo.
4th round pick. Yeah, because they traded it for Jonathan Mingo, and it wound up costing them because they sat there and once again, for the second year in a row, just like last year, they traded the 4th round pick for Trey Lance, and they sat there, and that's when the running backs started coming off the board. And again, this year, there were, I think, 7 wide receivers and 6 running backs drafted in the 4th round, 2 positions of need for the Cowboys on offense. And they had to sit out the round. They could never get back in. Given that Blue in the 5th round seems like a good pick, and if he can evolve into what Tony Pollard was later in his career, be an every down type player, so much the better. But he should at least create some explosive plays for them on offense that they've been lacking.
Wasn't it 3rd round pick for Lance or not?
No, it was a 4.
Okay. I maybe think about Drew Henson.
Nobody's thinking about Drew Henson, not even the Yankees.
20 years ago, where Bill Parcells was only listening to Joe Torre at that point, and the Cowboys went ahead and made the deal anyway. Okay, by the way, Ed, while you were talking about Blue, who I like too, 42 catches, close to 400 yards, and 6 touchdown catches. And so he's very difficult in space to cover, and then ran for over 700 yards. So again, he was not the bell cow. This team is really loading up on 3rd down backs, and so we don't know. Is it a change of pace if they're all changed? You know what I mean? Like, who are they changing the pace from?
Who's the banger?
they're all change of pace, but we need a pacer. We need somebody to set the pace. Okay. Ed, before we, and just a quick, Shamar James was who they traded up to get from Florida. The linebacker, sideline to sideline guy, as you pointed out, didn't run that well at the combine, and I should say ran poorly. But they obviously liked him and gave up. They came rolling up the board to get him. So that was in the 5th round. So I think that was somebody they obviously wanted. And then we talked about the big nose tackle, and then and they also picked up an offensive lineman, and you'll like this. The offensive lineman they picked up had a little more flex to him, okay? Could play guard, could play tackle. I know you like those guys that can kind of do a couple of things, and so this guy has played both in college. I just wanted to point that out to you.
That's good to know. I'm all for position flex, as you know.
Okay, Ed, real quick, the Shadur Sanders thing, man, you and I both known Dion. I would say, I don't know if I shared this with you, Ed. I think I joked on Twitter. You may have seen me joke about this. I purposely, although I'm not above a Twitter joke, I purposely, because I don't like delighting in someone, having a rough time and plummeting.
Someone else's misery.
Yeah, it's not really my style. And so made no joke, made nothing of the thing yesterday, the day before. And then yesterday, I just noticed, I'm like, well, I thought I followed Dion. I mean, that's weird because it gave me the option to follow him. And when I hit follow, it said the owner of this account has blocked you. It's like, oh gosh, what did I do? I feel
should I check? Should I check and see if I'm blocked?
Yeah, you ought to see if Dion's blocked.
Let's just do it live on the air here. What do you think?
I know I've been blocked.
That's sad.
Yeah, Mac Brown also blocked me, and then we ended up getting along fine. But then he didn't know how to unblock me.
No, I'm not blocked.
Oh, you can still DM
I'm
him if
I'm,
you need
I'm
to.
following him, and no, he doesn't follow me. But I'm allowed to follow him,
Good,
unlike you.
good. I don't know. Yeah, they're not. Yeah, there's one ESPN personality because I made a joke about a hug that this reporter shared with Jason Garrett after a game one time, and it did not go well. And so that reporter, who's no longer at ESPN, blocked me. But
And
you know,
that's not me.
no,
In case
no,
people were wondering. I mean,
it's not.
we do give, there is obvious friction between us at times, and I just want people to know for the record, I have not blocked you yet.
That's right. You were this morning. You were thinking about it when you couldn't reach me. Okay, but on Shador, again, I thought Bill O'Brien said it well. He's someone that doesn't really know that family, but like a lot of people, has compassion. But in this instance, he was not in an NFL war room. It was funny today to hear these reporters saying, "We're talking to GMs and people in the front offices, and they just feel horrible for the Sanders family." I'm like, well, take him, take him. If you feel so bad about it, go take him. Why don't you stop letting him fall? He falls all the way to the fifth round. Again, Ed, I knew this would, our opinion makers, Stephen A. and everybody. You sort of know where this is all going to go, and is it Dion? Is it this? Is it that? There were anonymous sources. Tom Pelissero, who we both like, is a good reporter for NFL Network, was quoting these anonymous sources, which we all have done at times. And I guess somebody, assistant coach, said it's the worst in all his years of he's doing these formal interviews. It's the worst he's ever experienced. And so I think when a guy slides, and Ed, both you and I have pretty good relationships with Mel Kiper. You've known him for longer than I have, but I know him fairly well. And man, this has been interesting to watch because not only did he have him higher than most people, but it's kind of dominated a lot of the ESPN coverage, especially that first night, especially when Cam Ward was taken. ESPN, I think, rightly has gotten some criticism for that. And it led today to like he and Reese Davis getting in some kind of back and forth, almost shouting match. This is a very weird deal because Ed, there's so many dynamics here. There's all these players and former players' relationships with Dion in play. There's what Dion thinks about all this. There's what the kid's doing. There's what Shador's doing. But this thing has ended up in a mess. Now, the funny one was that I hope you saw this. Shiloh, the son, today tweeted out that because his dad, he didn't think his dad was doing a good job as an agent, that he reached out and changed agents today. I thought that was pretty funny. That was Shiloh Sanders, who plays defensive back for the Buffaloes, and I guess is in this draft as well. But Ed, I mean, you've watched this play out. Again, you've covered Dion. You know him. What do you in your mind, is this just, hey, these teams didn't want him to be their quarterback, or was it something more than that in terms of how a guy this highly rated would fall as far as he did?
I kind of agree with Jonathan Jones of CBS, who kind of characterized this whole thing as a repudiation of the way the Sanders family handled the process of allowing teams to evaluate him. I mean, he didn't throw at the Senior Bowl, the Combine. He threw only at his, personal pro day. He thought he was going to go as the first player in the draft. And so there were times when he would put on social media, hey, I'm wearing Raiders colors today. And then it looked like the Giants were going to have the first pick. And hey, look, my cleats are blue and red because I'm going to go to the Giants, And so I think all of that turned teams off. And then apparently there was a sense among teams that he felt like he wasn't going to waste his time in interviews with teams he felt had no chance to get it. In other words, if you're outside the top 5, I don't need to deal with you because you have no shot to get me. And he conducted himself in those interviews, according to some of them, in that manner. And so they were understandably offended by the way the Sanders have approached this entire thing, getting ready to get drafted and show teams who you're all about. And beyond that, ultimately, what mattered the most was their evaluation of him on the field, Matt. I mean, geez, look what they did for Deshaun Watson. I mean, the guy was accused of 20 sexual assaults. They still made him the highest paid player in football history and gave up 3 first-round draft picks for him. So, the NFL will sell their soul for the right quarterback. And what happened to him, I think, is mostly beyond what I just said. It's mostly the result of their evaluation of him as a player. I talked to an offensive coordinator before the draft started who said, hey, look, to me, he's got average build. He's not a great athlete. He has an okay arm. Like he can play with it in the NFL. You can win with it in the NFL. But he doesn't have anything that's really exceptional. And the one thing that stands out is he got sacked 92 times the last 2 years. That's like 20 times more than any other quarterback in college football the last 2 years. And so he's a guy that doesn't translate to Sunday. Like, you got to get the ball out fast in the NFL. And he's not decisive, and he escapes out the back end. And so ultimately, I think those judgments were what resulted in him being picked way later than he presumed. And then at some point, probably the elements of, he's only going to be the backup quarterback here. Do I really want to deal with the spectacle of him being unhappy in that role? What's Dion saying publicly about the way his son's being treated and coached and the opportunities being provided? And if you're a coach whose job might be in jeopardy this year, you might fear the owner's solution will be, if Shadur's your quarterback, let's just bring in Dion.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of elements to it, but ultimately I just don't think he handled the interactions with the teams well. And I don't think that they were that impressed with what he did on the field.
All right. I think that's absolutely right. And this is when you block me on Twitter, this is what happens to you. That's not exactly true. That was good, Ed. I appreciate everything about that, and the fact that, boy, you've covered Dion, been around him. It's interesting because we both have a relationship with, like I think we're both, a lot closer, and have actual friendships with Michael, but yet those two are extremely close, and it's just interesting, the whole thing, and to watch this thing play out, and this was the Shadur thing did kind of hang a cloud over this draft, but I think for the Cowboys, for the most part, I think fans, there's some weirdness of it in the sense that they didn't really get the starting bell cow running back. They didn't get a number 2 wide receiver, 2 things we'd talked about a lot. They got a lot of other pieces, but Ed, I guess if you're going to give them credit for anything, it is, sticking to their board. And these were the players that were on the board, and we'll see how they go. I think Will McClay, for the most part, has hit on a lot of picks. I think the last year's first-round pick is still hanging in the balance. Tyler Guyton. We need, the Cowboys need all 3 Tylers to get it going. And I'm just sad Biotish is no longer with the team. Could have had 4 Tylers right there on the offensive line, which would have been a lot of fun. But Ed, any final thoughts as we get ready to wrap up our post-game coverage of the Cowboys day 3 draft?
Yeah, I agree with you that for the most part, especially when they picked high, as they did this year, picking 12th in each round for the most part, that Will McClay has done an excellent job. And when they followed their board, as it seems they have this year, it didn't seem really to draft for need in any obvious position. I think they've done well. I think the question you can ask or have about their team building process is, do they do enough as a draft and develop team to support that with their activity in free agency? They never seem to go out and sign a significant starting player in free agency, and they didn't again this year, even though they were more active in free agency. And Stephen Jones felt like what they did accomplish was they filled holes to the point that they couldn't be forced or wouldn't be forced into drafting a player for need. But they still, to me, have holes at wide receiver opposite CeeDee Lamb, and they don't have an answer at running back yet. And they've now gone through the draft and through free agency and failed, in my mind, to adequately address those 2 positions. And all too often, they've sent Dak Prescott out to win games without having capable wide receivers. And I fear that they are about to put him in that position again. I think CeeDee Lamb had 34% of their receiving yards last year, and that was the most in the NFL for any player who was not a rookie. And they were one of only 3 teams that had a single receiver responsible for all their 100-yard receiving games. So that's too much of a burden for CeeDee Lamb. And especially if he's not going to be in the lineup, you don't have anybody capable of elevating to the number 1 receiver spot and taking his place and giving them a chance to win with the passing game. So I think it's a mistake if they go into the season with the running back group and the number 2 receiver that they have right now.
All right, Ed, great stuff. I tell you, you securing Bill O'Brien, that really made this show. I mean, I think our opinion certainly buffeted that and served as a good complimentary piece. But I think having Bill O'Brien on, the former he's the current Boston College head coach, former Houston Texans head coach, former Penn State head coach. But he was Ed. You and Bill obviously had a great relationship because he was excited to come on and seemed happy to do it. So thank you for that, Ed. Really appreciative. It's been an interesting draft. Glad we could bring this to you. We'll be sharing this with you over the weekend. Hope you'll share this with others. We certainly appreciate Mason for filling in with us this weekend from the Rogue Media Network and the whole Rogue Media gang, Z and the rest of them, Corey. Appreciate everybody who's been a part of this. Ed, for Ed Werder, I am Matt Mosley, and good night. We'll see you next time on Doomsday.
We are Rogue Media Sports.